this video, I'm just going to talk through some of the feedback we got on our pitch. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. I was away doing something else media related, but I just want to talk through some of the things that went up and what I would have said had I been there. I've watched the video of what was said and I've written it all down, so I'm just going to talk through all the things that were said and kind of give my point of view and my account. So the first thing that came up was, how is the short film going to be 5 minutes? I don't think that it's particularly a problem. It's not something that's concerning us at the minute, because I think the way in which we've decided to do it and the narrative we've given it, because it's kind of lots of segments that comprise into this big story and this big character study, I think that it would get to a point where if we had too much footage, because it's just lots of little sequences, so there's the bit with the spiders and there's the bit where he's getting his head poked in the back of class, because there's so many little bits and so many little flashbacks, it would kind of be a case of, if it was too long, we could choose the bit that was executed the most poorly, take that out, or if it was the other way around, we could just think of another little nice shot that could go in there to bring it up to the running time that's required. So it's not really something that we're worried about, and at this time, how we kind of visualise it, it should be fine and fit into the required running time. The next thing is the problems with buses and trains, and this is the main thing that we've realised in the past couple of weeks after writing the voiceover, was that in fact it would be very hard to film on a bus or a train, because we're using young kids as actors. There'd be issues with consent and buying tickets, and also the main problem would probably be with the bus companies themselves not wanting to be filmed, or having to pay to do it, or having to hire it, or we just didn't really want to have to get into that. So we thought maybe to start with we could show him waiting at the bus station or the train station, and then maybe one of us could carry the camera onto the bus or train kind of inconspicuously and have a point of view shot of supposedly him getting on the bus and maybe looking out the window. Maybe that's not a shot we would use because it's quite cliched, but it could work nicely. So we'll do a couple of different things and then see what works best. But yeah, we do see that that would be a problem, and that is something that we've kind of changed our mind on the most majorly. The next thing is, will he be a mature character? Because there was the possibility of him hitchhiking, getting on a train. The whole point of him is that he's obviously very immature because of what he's done. He's obviously very troubled, but what we're trying to show is, the whole film is kind of what's going on in his head. So we want to show him for what he is and kind of his personality. We want to show that he's very troubled and very naive, but we don't want to show that he's stupid or he hasn't thought it through, or be too two-dimensional and jump to assumptions about what's motivated him to do this. The fact that he thought it through in such a way and put up with it for so long shows some degree of mental capacity. And planning to get on a train, that obviously takes some planning, but it's obviously not a very mature thing to do, and it's very naively thought out, because really at the end we know that he's either going to be caught out or arrested, and that's really the only outcomes. So obviously he's not going to be very mature. He's just going to be quite a troubled character and an outsider, but we still want to maintain the idea of childhood, because he's only meant to be 12 to 14, and I think that will come through in his actions and how we show him. Someone asked about the spiders. There was meant to be a small part in the short film where we show spiders kind of going around in a jar. Originally in the voiceover it said that he watches them rot and puts them in jars, and then we changed that to kind of watches them perish, the idea that he takes nature and a life form into his own hands and kind of watches it die because he can, and he can have that control over another life form when he can't have control over what's happening to him. And it was also meant to be quite foreshadowing of what is eventually going to happen to his bully Sarah. I think it would be a really nice shot. Someone else did also say, like, how do we plan to do it? Because if we actually put a camera on a spider for the amount of time it would take for it to die inside a jar, it would take ages and it just might not be possible. And then in the feedback video, actually, Vanessa suggested that we use a time-lapse camera, and I think that's a really brilliant idea. With the experimental nature of the film anyway, I think it would fit really, really well. It would be something different, and it takes what could have been a tiny 5-second segment and turns it into something that could be quite a defining shot in the film and very significant. So I think that there was quite a good response to it, and it's something we're definitely going to go forward with the time-lapse camera if we can. Someone also said should work well as long as the death is stylized. Yeah, I agree. That was the whole point. How it's written in the script it's not meant to be an elaborate death scene. Obviously, we can't carry that off as students and on our budget, and also because we're using child actors, we wouldn't want to compromise them in their safety. So how I had it in my head when I was writing the voiceover and then subsequently the script was that maybe he would go up behind her, put the scarf around her neck, maybe we'd see her facial expression react to that, and then it would cut away to a really wide long shot of him, and yeah, we'd see what had happened, but not in graphic detail, because you don't need that. You don't need to see children killing each other for it to be an effective short film. I think you're basically going to know what's happened. It's the opening line is Max has killed someone today, so I think we will do it stylized because that's how we initially planned to do it. And if someone's saying that's how it will work, then it kind of shows that maybe we had it kind of sorted out already. So I think that as long as we're very careful with it and carry it off well, then it will look really nice and it will be kind of a vital part to the film without defining it. Someone said we should film the face out of the window on the... I think they meant film it out of the window on the train or the bus. This is the only bit of feedback where I really couldn't see where they were coming from, because that would suggest that someone else is on the train pulling away from him. I'm not sure if maybe that was just a comment that wasn't thought through properly, but yeah, that's not really relevant or constructive, and it wouldn't fit if the train was pulling away from him, because it shows that he hasn't even got on it, which is the whole point, and that's the whole narrative and how it kind of brings it round into kind of a circle, but a circle that isn't complete because you don't know what happens to him afterwards because it's ambiguous. The next thing was that we needed to give the voiceover an identity. I do agree with that. I didn't really think it through when I was first doing it. I just wanted to give like an objective account of what had happened that doesn't really take sides with either Max or Sarah. And I think how we'll do it is, in our heads, I think we're going to say that it's from the perspective of his teacher that has some degree of sympathy with him. But we don't want to define that, because then you have to get technical and think about what the narrator would actually have seen and what he can actually say. But I think if we approach it as if maybe we're his teacher that feels some sympathy for him, but then is diplomatic between the two because he knows what he's done is wrong, I think that would work really well. The inspiration for the voiceover came from a short film we researched called Crossbow, and that had a really lovely voiceover on it that was kind of detached but knew exactly what was going on in the situation. So I think as long as we write it well, with some sort of identity in mind that we don't necessarily define, it should come off really well and be really important. And we've also got some people in mind that we think could read it. We think it should be a more mature voice, a more mature levelled, quite flat all the way through. Obviously animated but flat, as not to be too kind of over the top and melodramatic. And I think if we get the right person doing it, it will sound really good once we've got the script together properly. Someone said, shouldn't his parents be in it? I really don't think they need to be. This is a 5-minute short film, not a 1.5 hour feature. And also kind of showing the parents of a bullied child. It's quite cliched. Like, I can kind of like visualise scenes of him kind of on the stairs being neglected and struck out, and I don't think we need that. I don't think that our character's necessarily meant to be a victim of neglect or anything. He's just a very troubled individual and an outsider, and everything's kind of built up to a point where he doesn't really know what to do, and he needs kind of that moment of revenge and catharsis of actually getting rid of what he thinks is causing all of his troubles. And I don't think that needs to be his parents, and I don't think his parents need to be in it. This is meant to be about him, not necessarily anyone else, and I think it'd be quite nice if we kept things arty and we kept things abstract and more centred on him rather than trying to bring in lots of characters without backstories. So I think that in a kind of a quick response to that, no, his parents won't be in it. Someone else said they like the spiders, which is good because that's something we're going to go ahead with. Someone else said, what is it specifically that makes him snap? That is a good point. When I watched that, looking back, it was meant to be that all the kind of stuff falls out of his locker, but that's not necessarily something that would make you snap to the point where you'd want to kill someone. So I thought maybe if we show it building up and then maybe she could there's something in the voiceover that says that he always gets called a creep and things like that, so maybe if that's kind of a trigger, and I kind of have a scene where maybe he's at his locker and Sarah just walks past and just calls him a creep or something really horrible, and then maybe lots of stuff falls out of his locker. That could be that moment where he's like, no, I can't take it anymore. And my idea of how to film it was to have it really quickly edited with him kind of opening the locker, everything falling out, him in the spotlight, it going red, and it's kind of like that really is that breaking point, but not necessarily a breaking point where he just instantly attacks her, one where he kind of has like a day or so to think on it and kind of come up with what he's going to do, and then subsequently have to deal with his actions that aren't shown on screen. Someone else said, is it meant to be like cyberbullying that he's going through? I don't necessarily think it is. I think what we're going to show is more like actual like peers being horrible to him. We're not showing that much at all, actually. We're really not planning to show anything too much, because I think that for a short film you need to be interested in it, and you don't necessarily need to enjoy it in the more conventional of terms, as in you find it funny. But if we kind of filmed it so it was compelling without being uncomfortable, I think that would be how it really needs to be executed. And with cyberbullying, it really narrows down the shots. All of the kind of short films and documentaries I've seen before just kind of shows computer screens. I think that really narrows down what we can do because of the nature of the film being really experimental and abstract. I think that we should kind of keep it as bullying in the broader sense, and maybe concentrate on other bits of his life more so than the actual bullying, because that will become apparent as it goes on. Someone else said that our actual title was too common. First of all, I'm not too concerned about the title because it's not actually going to influence the film itself. We wanted to keep it really simple, and just by having the protagonist's name, Max, 3 letters, it keeps it simple, it keeps it open. I have seen lots of short films where they've got like a name as the title for it, but I think that this one works really well. It doesn't really have any connotations at all. It keeps it really open. It wouldn't put anyone off watching it. If it was a really long name, it might kind of connotate like some sort of affluence or class, but the name that we've chosen is so simple that I think it just keeps it really open and doesn't set any expectations for our film, which is what we want really. Another person said about the parents, which I've already answered, and the last thing was, is the character of Sarah meant to be jealous of Max? No, it's just, at the end of the day, they're only 12 to 14-year-olds without any real backstory in it. She's not necessarily meant to be jealous of him. She's just not necessarily not a very nice person because she's only young, but it's just that kind of classic bullying that builds up, but it's the individual that it's actually inflicted upon that reacts, and in our instance, to make a kind of interesting short film, it's reacting in a very extreme way. And how we're actually going to show her character, we're not going to kind of demonise her and show that there was some justification for what happens to her. We're just going to present the facts and present what's going on in Max's mind, so the audience can kind of sympathise with both and come to their own conclusions and take away from the film what they want. We don't want to show that either of their actions is justifiable, but it's just with Max we're going to show some background to it because it's such an extreme action. We needed to show the build up to it, so you had some idea of his characterization, whereas with Sarah it's just going to be kind of that classic bullying, name calling, just general childhood spitefulness, but we're not going to show that she deserved it or had it coming because that would be inappropriate. So we're just going to present the facts and show a simple stylized death scene, and then have a nice circular narrative with some ambiguity at the end, and people can draw their own conclusions from it. So that's all the things and kind of aspects I had written down. I think it's really helped me watching the feedback video to just to trigger some things I might not have otherwise have thought that maybe need changing or tweaking. I think I've answered everything, and it's really going to help us in our short film, so I've definitely got a lot to take forward from it, and it was a very useful activity watching it back.